Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to... Wow, I totally forgot my own intro. Welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and just a quick reminder, if you are enjoying this content, then I would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever it is that you are listening to this. If you're watching the video version on YouTube, then please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment. I would love to engage with you guys wherever you are listening or watching to this. Today, I want to talk about using our voices. This is something that I have struggled with for a long time. It's kind of been a thread in many of the previous episodes that I've released. And one of the things about this that I find to be so important is it's something that I still see so often where individuals feel powerless to speak up for themselves or to say what's on their mind, what their needs are. And it's something that is not serving us at all. Trust me, being someone who has wrestled with this for almost 40 years, this is something that is not helping us. In most cases, it is hurting us. All I have to do is just turn on the news in order to hear the vitriol of people who are using their voices. And unfortunately, the vocal minority are the ones that are being heard the most, and what they have to say is so harmful compared to what many of us would rather be saying, be encouraging, and to even be hearing from others. On Blue Sky, I try and use a post every single Monday in a way to offer some encouragement and affirmations to people. I like to have a Happy Wodeness Day post that I put up on Wednesdays, and it's usually accompanied by a video or a photo of Odin just being himself, and I will use that as a reference to discuss whatever it is that happens to be the topic that I'm drawing from that photo. I am trying my best to use my voice to create a space for curiosity, a place to ask questions, a place to be open-minded, and to explore different dynamics of what it is to be the heroes of our own stories. This is not something I would have done if I hadn't done work on myself to believe that I have something that is worth saying and to use my voice to do so. And this is something that I'm still working on. I do still struggle to speak up for my own needs, especially in my relationships, in my marriage relationships, and even just with my friendships. I can be too much of a giver and not acknowledge when I am too depleted and I need something in return. And the thing that's so crazy about this for me is there are so many times where I have actually spoken up for myself, and surprise, surprise, I have been received with kindness and with empathy, and I have had people give me what it is that I need. This is something that I heard on a much earlier Robcast episode where Rob Bell shared a story about talking with his wife Kristen Bell, and not that Kristen Bell, a different Kristen Bell. I already made that mistake once already. And he was really struggling with something and was just kind of stuck in his own head about whether what he was doing was worthwhile and should he pivot to something else. And he just needed someone that he trusted to speak into his life and break him out of the rumination that his mind was consumed by. And in this episode, he shares about how he went to his wife, Kristen, and asked her to say something to him. He's the one who provided the words. He told her what to say. She turned around and said it to him, and he knew that he could trust her to speak the truth. And he's like, I encourage you to try and do the same thing and see what happens. And there is this one day, I've probably already shared this story before. I was so wrapped up in my own issues and my own struggles with running this coaching business and not really being able to provide much beyond just like taking care of the basic bills for the business. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm not the breadwinner in this house, and I never have been since Libby and I got married. I have never been the breadwinner, and that was something I used to feel a lot of shame about. And yet I found myself this one morning, in fact, it probably even started the night before, I was just wrestling and stuck in this negative loop in my mind about how I made the worst mistake of my life and I should have just remained as a substitute teacher or tried to get my own teaching job, even though I was just dying inside as I was doing that. And I was so stuck thinking that this was the worst possible mistake that I could have ever made. And while I was doing this, I was taking care of some things in the morning, and I was reminded of what Rob said and how he approached his partner, Kristen, and asked her, hey, can you speak these things over me? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try this with Libby. I am seriously going to try this with Libby. And she comes out of her office. She was grabbing a little snack in the pantry. And I remember I was so stressed and tense about this because it's a very vulnerable act to do this. And I am leaning up against the counter in our kitchen. And she comes walking, she's heading back from the pantry to her office. And I just said, hey, Libby, can I ask for your help with something? And she just goes, yeah, sure. What is that? And I just said, I need to hear that leaving my job and starting my own small business and being a coach wasn't the worst mistake of my entire life. I'm so lost in these thoughts, and I just need to hear that this wasn't the biggest mistake that I could have made. And I love Libby, and she just looked at me and she said, yeah, sure. And that's where it was left at. So once she said that, I bring her closer to me and I just look her straight in the eyes and I said, would you please repeat those words back to me? And then she understood what I was asking. And I just saw her eyes just soften. And not only did she give me the affirmation I needed with this wasn't the worst mistake that I could have made, she expressed even more about how I've been helping people and the work that I'm doing is something that is beneficial. And she invested in me in that moment in such a powerful way. And I felt so seen. I felt so alive. And she wouldn't have known what was going on if I hadn't said anything. Now, I wish this was something that I did all the time, but I don't. I still get stuck in my old martyr complex back when I was a Christian, and that I'm just supposed to struggle and suffer, and it's not worth me even speaking up for myself because someone else is always going through something worse than I am. I mean, this is something that is so ingrained. It has taken me a lot of time and effort to even realize and get myself to where I am today. And I still fall into this old pattern. I'm also reminded of another time when I really needed some love from my friends, Ben and Brandon. And I reached out to them about something that I was struggling with. And they were both like, we're here for you. Let us know if you need anything. And I just said, you know what? I could really do with a good hug after workout. Or not after workout, before workout. And these two loved on me in ways that only these two can. And I felt so great afterward. And they wouldn't have known had I not spoken up for myself. This is even something that I have learned while observing Libby. She's so much better than I am about speaking up for herself. Though early on, it was also something that she struggled with, especially when she is struggling with some anxiety or rumination or something like that. I've now started to recognize this pattern where she needs to have some time to ponder and think on it. And then once she has done that processing, then she can verbally bring it to me for some additional help and additional processing. And this was even something that happened just this last weekend where Libby and I went to RadCon with our D&D friends, and we had a great time while we were there. And as we were leaving and we were saying farewell to our friends John and Dan, Libby was trying so hard not to cry in that moment. And she was experiencing some very significant grief because we had spent so much time with a lot of these friends over the course of this weekend. We spent more time with John and Dan than any of our other friends. And when it was finally time to say farewell to them, even though the very next day we were going to be playing some more Baldur's Gate 3 online, Libby was still sad and she was still grieving. And I could tell that this was something that was hard for her. And I tried to do what I could to just give her the space that she needed, to offer my help. And she just needed to be with that sadness. And then as soon as we were going to bed that night, she was just cuddling up with me in bed. And I'm just lying there and I've got my arm around her back. And I know, I've been around her long enough. I know when she's still wrestling with these thoughts. And I gave her an invitation. Now, Libby has given me invitations to open up and be vulnerable and honest. And there have been many, many more times where I haven't taken her up on that offer instead of actually taking her up on the offer. So I give her the opportunity to just open up and express what she is experiencing. And we spent, I don't know, maybe about half an hour, something like that, just talking. And I let her get everything out that was on her mind. And she was even having some shameful messages coming in about how it's like, it's stupid for me to be feeling this way, but I'm feeling this way. And I was able to just tell her that, no, it's not stupid. It's really not. And we were able to put some language to what she was experiencing. And that following morning, she felt so much better. She went to bed without being awash in the chaos of her own emotions and her own thoughts that night. And she was able to get some good sleep. And she spoke up for herself. She used her voice in order to let me know that something wasn't right. It is important for us to remember that we're not mind readers. As much as we like to think that everyone else can listen into the radio that is our internal dialogue, though, granted, I just listened to a Stuff You Should Know podcast today that was talking about how people are trying to study the inner dialogue, the inner monologue that people have, and not everyone has that. So I'm not going to be so naive to say that everyone has an inner monologue, but I do, and Libby does, and some of our friends have the same thing, where we have a running commentary going on between our ears. When something upsets us, it is easy for us to think that everyone can notice that we're upset, when oftentimes they can't. Us being awash in it, it's abundantly clear, but that's not the case for everyone. This is why it is so valuable for us to actually speak up for ourselves. Again, I'm going to use myself as an example here because I'm terrible at this. About 2 weeks ago, Libby and I were going to go shopping. There were some things that I wasn't able to find at our local grocery store. And there's this natural grocer that opened up. I don't really remember when it was, but this was the first time we ever went. And Libby was hoping that we might be able to find a certain kind of salt that we weren't able to find. And turned out that wasn't the case. But I got up, and this was a Saturday. I got up on this Saturday, and I went for a freezing cold drive with Odin. And I took him down to one of the parks. We actually did like 2 different circuits. We have our standard circuit that I will drive him and even Libby down. We have 2 little loops that we follow. And then I have also been going down to a park trail, and we've just kind of been driving. And I'm having the windows down so Odin can stick his head out, because just kind of like me, he doesn't seem to be bothered by the cold a whole lot. So I drove him around for an hour at least. And I dropped by this coffee shop that Libby and I had just tried out a couple of weeks before. It has a favorite drink of hers, and I'm like, I bet she'd love to have one of these. And we were able to get a treat for Odin as well. And I'm not going to say actually what it was because Odin's right behind me, and if I say the words, he's going to get excited. And I come home, and by this time, it's getting to be late morning, maybe early afternoon. And Libby is awake at this point, and she sees the sweet matcha drink that I got her, and she was so excited for it. Odin was nice and worn out from all of the sensory information he was taking in on this really freezing cold drive. And I'm like, okay, now I just want to sit down and I want to watch some shows. I've really been into playing Metaphor ReFantasio. And it's like, I want to sit down and I want to play some more of this game. And about an hour and a half or so after I come back from this, Libby's like, I kind of want to go window shopping. And as soon as she said that, I'm just like, why? Why does it have to be today? Why does it have to be now? And I'm trying to be understanding because Libby does get cabin fever quite often, and she doesn't get out of the house as much as I do. And I pretty much leave the house every single day. And I had already been out of the house, and I'm like, I just want to stay home right now. And now Libby's wanting to go out and go to this natural grocer. And I didn't say anything about it. And it wasn't until we were there looking around that Libby noticed I wasn't exactly the most pleased. And she asked me if everything was okay. And once she gave me the opportunity, I finally opened up and said, I honestly didn't want to come here today. I just wanted to stay home. And she's like, well, why didn't you say anything? And I'm like, I oftentimes don't feel like I can say anything about it. And she was very gracious and very understanding. We were able to reconcile over those differences. And by the time we were leaving, I was in a much better headspace. Libby was in a much better headspace. And things could have been different had I just been honest and said, I really don't want to go today because I'm always leaving the house. I just want to stay home. Now, I know that me sharing the story, there could even be some people where it's like, oh, geez, Marcus, you're just being such a baby about it. What's the big deal? And it's like, why couldn't Libby just go by herself? Or, the many, many other options out there. And I will just say, without getting things to be too personal, there are some mental health reasons why Libby wouldn't go by herself. And so I just kind of felt chained in that scenario where it's like, she's not going to go by herself. She wants to go, I may as well just buck up and go. And again, things could have been so different had I actually just used my voice and spoke up for myself. There are so many people out there who are doing what they can in order to speak out against injustices that they see. And we're talking, oh man, I may have already said this, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. There was a time in early January where Libby and I thought we were going to lose out on our medical insurance because of changes that the Trump administration were making and stopping funds for Medicaid. There are people who are recognizing what is happening and trying to do what they can to speak up against it. And I am reminded of this graph that I saw about how this most recent election had the majority of people choosing not to vote at all. I kind of get the feeling that a lot of the people who chose not to vote are likely those who believe that their voice doesn't matter. And I've even had some conversations with friends about this. And we can logic ourselves into this understanding of why it's not worth the effort to do this civic duty. And yet, if we had more people who turned out to vote, things might have ended out differently than what we're going through right now. And here we are with an administration that is effectively wanting to repeal the 20th century. Go back to how things were in like the 1920s, back when you could have children working in factories in very dangerous conditions, and these regulations that are meant to keep us safe are just being rolled back. And there are many people who are trying to speak up about this. And here I am throwing my voice into it as well. It is important for us to use our voices because sometimes our voice is the only one that some people will hear. There are so many people out there who are not going to hear what's being said on certain news outlets, or maybe they've siloed themselves into listening to and watching one exclusive station, and they're just getting fed inaccurate information. Sometimes it could be that your voice is the only one that's going to be different from what others are saying. Or not saying, but what others are saying, but also what those close to you are hearing. You might be that voice of reason. You might be able to become curious and maybe poke some holes into these arguments that other people are spouting. Regardless, just like I learned several years ago now, that my voice is important and I have important things to say, the same goes for you as well. You have a voice that is important for people to hear, and these people need to hear what you have to say. There's this chiropractor place nearby that every month they're putting up, usually they do like an inspirational quote and then they have a funny one. Like an example, the funniest one I've ever seen is on their sign, it said, "Nothing is truly lost until your mom can't find it." And they usually have something humorous and then something inspiring. They haven't been doing something humorous since the holidays. And on one side of their sign, it says, "Be a voice, not an echo." Because echoes are distorted and they're difficult to hear. Be that voice that your circle needs to hear. Be that voice that your community needs to hear. And absolutely be safe about this. In today's society where it is there is so much animosity, there is in society today more and more tribalism and an us versus them mentality. And you're either with us or you're against us. And so absolutely be smart about it. However, there are people who need to hear what you have to say. And it is important what you have to say. I hope you found this encouraging. This is something I am reminding myself of, if you couldn't tell, with all of my own anecdotes about this. Just know that you're not alone in what you're going through. There are always others who understand and can relate to what you're going through. Tori Williams Douglas and Benjamin Fay of the White Homework podcast, they talk about very specific experiences that I've never had because of my skin color, because of the privilege that I've had. I can listen and take in their stories, but I'm not going to be able to fully relate to what they say. It's still incredibly eye-opening for me to hear their stories. And these two find solidarity with each other and with many of the communities that they are a part of, who do understand what it is to be a black man or a black woman in this society that oftentimes does not value them, that judges them based on their skin color. So there are going to be people who can understand and relate to what you're going through. Might take a little work to find them, but they're out there. Listen for their voices and then join yours in with theirs, because people need to hear what you have to say. And until next time, live strong for today.